The idea that he's put it to bed forever because he's been in office for 7 months. And look, let's give the man his due. He put on ice a conflict that was horribly escalating between India and Pakistan, and everyone was terrified that it would go nuclear. And I think that was his fear too. Uh, but it's not gone away. He hasn't solved anything. He's just stopped it all in their tracks.
Let's talk about Donald Trump's attitude in general to war as president. Do you think, from what you've seen over the last 7 months and, of course, his previous 4 years, does he have kind of a one-size-fits-all approach? Or do you think he does sort of appreciate the nuances of each issue he's faced?
I think that Donald Trump and nuance are strangers to one another. His preeminent motivating goal in all of this, I think, really is, and I wouldn't say this if I didn't believe it was true, and it's taken me a long time to really think this was true. He wants a Nobel Peace Prize. And he keeps bringing it up. We've known that he's called up the Norwegian Prime Minister, on the eve of a big decision or negotiation that he has to do, and said, I want this. In terms of one size fits all, other than that, I think that is literally as deep as it goes. He doesn't, he definitely has tactics that he uses, which is to frame conflicts in the sense of what can he do to influence the participants in a conflict. And he tends to go to threats, and those threats tend to be linked to trade. So that's what he's comfortable with. He thinks he's moved away from sanctions, were his big thing in his first term. He's moved much towards, you could argue they are a form of sanction, but he's moved more towards, I will put tariffs on you if you don't do what I want. So yeah, that is essentially his model.
You've probably summed up pretty much this entire interview in your first answer there, but let's dig a little bit deeper, and we'll talk about some of the specific conflicts that he says he has either prevented or ended. And when I read your piece on Thailand and Cambodia's conflict, you sort of obviously made it clear that there's hundreds of years of nationalistic rivalry. But you also added clearly that sort of behind the latest violence was in part Donald Trump's tariff war. And, it sort of got me thinking his bragging of preventing wars feels a bit moot if he's sort of also partly behind the issues that cause them. I mean, do you think that is a tactic almost? Or just a bit of fortune for him that, I can stop something if I've started it?
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about it that way, because I lived in Cambodia about 30 years ago. So I frame that conflict between the two countries quite differently. Although I did bring up the tariff issue between them. That one is deeper rooted. But I think that the really important issue really is, and I don't wish to just denigrate Trump pointlessly, there's a lot of that, but it is important. He doesn't care what the issues are between these countries. So he doesn't know what the roots of that conflict are. He doesn't know that there's always been this issue, this very long issue between them, and between indeed Cambodia and Vietnam, that stems back like hundreds of years. And it's tied up to, the ancient Khmer Empire and what territory was lost there, and all these hatreds and stuff. All of that plays in on that level between those countries, but that's not what's in his mind. He is now saying, when he talks about what he's belatedly realizing are sort of insoluble conflicts like Ukraine and Russia. He sort of goes, I've solved, I've stopped 6 wars. And he's now saying 7, and I'm really perplexed what the 7th is, because I can't figure it out. But I think it's simply that he just wants to be seen he's counting them. It's as simple as that.
Look, he also talked about trade to a degree in his sort of his bid to end the hostilities between India and Pakistan back in May, and he said he believed his work had brought a ceasefire there, and he believed that would be permanent. In terms of his record and sort of peace, has that proven correct? And how do you think his claims when he talks about preventing or ending conflict, how do they play out?
I think in the short term, Trump's claims play out pretty well for him, but he's been in office for 7 months. These conflicts are deep rooted. So Congo, Rwanda, as he says, that's been going on for 30 years. He says it himself. Very proud of that. The idea that he solved the India-Pakistan conflict, which has never gone away from the moment of partition, much like a similar timetable to the Israel-Palestine conflict, it's never gone away. The idea that he's put it to bed forever because he's been in office for 7 months. And look, let's give the man his due. He put on ice a conflict that was horribly escalating between India and Pakistan, and everyone was terrified that it would go nuclear. And I think that was his fear too. But it's not gone away. He hasn't solved anything. He's just stopped it all in their tracks. And unfortunately, I used to live in India, isn't it? And I was there when Narendra Modi presided over the slaughter of 2,000 Muslims in Gujarat. He's not a very nice man. So I'm not giving him props. He is an authoritarian leader, but he is democratically elected, and India has many features of a functioning democracy. The idea that this has all just dissipated overnight because of Donald Trump is a fantasy. He has very badly wounded Narendra Modi with his claim that it was him that stopped that war with Pakistan. He has angered Modi. He has undermined Modi. And Modi is going off in the coming weeks to a trilateral conference with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. That's what Donald Trump's diplomacy has succeeded in doing. Yeah, he may have stopped the apparently hot phase of a war between India and Pakistan. I personally didn't think they would go there. I lived in India during one of these conflagrations, which we all were extremely nervous would go nuclear. People tend to come back from the brink when the stakes are that high. But what he's done is he's really alienated a country that really was a kind of floater in the geopolitical mix that wasn't with China, irredeemably with China and Russia. And he's actually, yes, he's stopped a conflict that probably wasn't going to explode. And he's pushed India towards the West's adversaries. And so I see that as long-term incredibly problematic.
Within sort of each of the ones I've mentioned to you so far, it's felt like there was something in it for Donald Trump to stop the hostilities, quite apart from the Nobel Peace Prize that you're talking about. That was a theme again in terms of minerals in your piece about Democratic Republic of the Congo too. But Trump continually talks about just wanting to stop the killing, doesn't he? Even if the byproduct of that is a Nobel Peace Prize, whether that happens or not. Do you see evidence anywhere that he genuinely is somebody who is sort of humanitarian in his thinking, that he just doesn't like people being killed?
Yes, I do. And this is one of the peculiarities about him. And like a lot of people are really resistant when I say that, but I don't know if it's I don't know if it's that he's empathetic, he's moved by I mean some people have actually suggested to me it's got something to do with his kind of OCD or his germ phobia. He doesn't like seeing those things. But whatever the you never know what's in someone's heart. He doesn't like seeing pictures of children dying and people dying. He doesn't like it. And it has motivated him in the past. It motivated him to strike Assad's Syria, when everyone was saying, stay out of that war, keep your troops out. It has motivated him to intervene. He even said, it just hasn't resulted in very much when it comes to Gaza. But the other day, when an Israeli tank shell by the Israelis' own admissions killed, there was a double strike on a hospital that killed journalists and medical staff and rescue workers. Trump said, and I thought he was quite revealing, he said, I don't like it. And then he said, I don't want to see it. And I thought, which is it? Are you actually bothered about it happening, or do you just wish that you didn't have to see it? And I think the same was true of the pictures of, he was moved when he saw them to say that those were pictures of starving children, when Israel was trying to sort of deny that they were and say, well, they've all got pre-existing conditions and they're not really starving, and then said, actually, they are starving, but it's Hamas's fault. And so Donald Trump actually did say those children are starving and that he didn't like it. So on some level, he reacts. I think that this is evidence that he is an emotionally driven decision maker rather than a diplomatically driven one. I'm not sure it wholly translates to the kind of reasoning that many of us might have. Like, he doesn't go deeper on those things, but he just doesn't like those images. And I think it's very interestingly, excuse me, when I was last in Ukraine, it turned out that Melania Trump has become a folk hero in Ukraine, because they've heard him now say this, that he says, oh, I had a lovely conversation with Putin and then I went home and the first lady said, oh, that's lovely to hear. Have you seen they've hit another, old person's home, children's home, hospital, XYZ. And so this has been picked up in Ukraine, and people are trading a lot on the fact that she's got an Eastern European background, and Eastern Europeans know what it means to be monstered and bullied by Russia. So yeah, in Ukraine, she's being held up as the conscience of, she's Donald Trump's conscience, and she's the one we should get to, because she shows him these things. And I mean, if I had any diplomatic advice to anyone dealing with Donald Trump who wants to move him in any way, when you go into a meeting, I'd say bring photos.
We've spoken a lot about sort of specific conflicts. There's one other that we haven't mentioned yet. That's Armenia and Azerbaijan. I don't know if you agree with me that it's sort of, that one feels actually quite significant. I mean, if they're signing of an agreement to end decades of conflict holds, then that is a real achievement. Now, admittedly, under the terms, there's also this transit corridor that's going to be called the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. But it is that, the Armenia-Azerbaijan agreement, is that actually a genuinely great achievement of his in war terms? Maybe the great achievement of his since January?
I am not sure that it's his achievement, but I think that out of all of these things that have been branded with his name, this might be the best one. And it's not complete yet. And yet, obviously, he's put his name on this corridor and everything. And he did sort of, force the conclusion, snapping his fingers, making it happen. So in terms of sort of finalizing that, I think that this might be the as it stands right now, this looks to me the most promising of his, and the thing that, if he were to get a Peace Prize, it should be for that. That is the most, that is the one I think that bears up in the face of analysis the best, as a really promising development towards the end of a very, very long conflict. And also, I would mention in that, really interesting, given his bizarre behavior over Ukraine with Russia, that is an agreement that actually kind of dislodges Russia as the great power maker in that region, and puts the US, has entirely contrary to this whole idea that he was going to be isolationist and all that. Actually, the US now has a huge stake in the ex-Soviet backyard, in a conflict that Russia has sought to take advantage from for all this time. It may be that actually Washington under Trump has staked an American flag there and brought an end to tension. Let's watch that one. But I would say it's his best chance.